We all begin in complete isolation, in complete darkness. I've recently given birth to my own little experiment. I can only begin to imagine the huge sensory experiences she's going through as she gets to grips with the world outside the womb. She is becoming socially dependent. Babies are born with vastly more neural connections than they need. They can distinguish not only between human faces, but also between the faces of animals. As some bits of the brain get used and others don't, babies start to cull unnecessary connections and refine their processing. But are we inherently dependent upon other people, or is this something that we've learnt? Psychologists think that just 3 days of isolation could be enough to create brain damage, and not just in humans. Animals subjected to isolation show behavioural changes, release different neurochemicals in the brain, and show changes in neural circuit functioning. During isolation, our brains are hypersensitive. They're alert for any kind of external stimulus, and depriving them of that can cause mental health conditions. One BBC Horizon experiment had volunteers go into isolation in complete darkness, and they started to hallucinate. Lacking any external stimulation, they made up their own. This shouldn't surprise us. You've heard of phantom limb syndrome. It's actually thought that over 80% of people who've lost a limb will at some point feel something in it. But what if you've never had that sensory experience before? Blind people who once had sight sometimes dream in pictures, but those who've never had it do not. For around 7 months through pregnancy, scientists think we can detect sleep cycles in babies in the womb. But as we can't measure their brain activity, it's very difficult to know whether they're dreaming, let alone whether or not they're dreaming in pictures. But isolation is about more than just sensory deprivation. We're social animals, and isolation affects us cognitively, hormonally, and metabolically. In the longest isolation experiments, an Italian decorator, Stefania Fellini, spent 130 days underground. She was unable to differentiate between day and night, and her 24-hour cycles lengthened to become 30 to 35 hours. In the time, she lost weight and her menstrual cycles ceased. Stefania was able to keep herself occupied performing martial arts and decorating her cave with supplies that she had brought in with her. And scientists think that these kinds of mental and physical stimulations are essential to staying healthy. In a Channel 5 documentary, In Solitary, the Antisocial Experiment, the participants were allowed to take in 3 personal items, and their choice of personal items, active, things they could do, or passive, things that had value to them, directly impacted their chances of success and ability to push through invasive negative feelings. So should we be using lockdown as a chance to reconnect with ourselves, maximise our use of free time and achieve self-actualisation? If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualisation is on the top, ahead of esteem, belongingness and love, safety, and physiological needs, like food. It has been argued that during lockdown we are retreating to the bottom 2 layers, safety and physiological needs. We're doing what we can to survive. Creating mental and physical stimulation isn't then a form of self-actualisation, it's a survival or coping tactic. We do these things in order to relieve the symptoms of isolation. And these symptoms may not seem very bad, but they actually carry a deadly weight, because people who are subjected to isolation will contract more illnesses and eventually die younger. Does this mean that if we let our brains shut down, we will suffer irreversible adverse effects? We honestly don't know. The brain is very plastic and can adapt and change, just like a baby's brain. However, repeated environmental stresses can create negative, ongoing effects on our health. This has been likened to an egg. Expose it to warm, comfortable experiences, and it will be resilient under stress. Deprive it of that, the same stress will break it much more easily. There's still a lot we don't know about our brains and what it means to be social animals. Let's not get egg on our faces. Babies are born with vastly more neural connections than they need. They can distinguish not only between human faces, Bobsy,